What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Movie Emporium's TV review of the Apple TV Plus original series, Masters of the Air. This will follow Part 8, which is the penultimate episode, which is once again directed by Rees. Now, I was definitely excited for the Tuskegee Airmen to pop up in this series, and they definitely pop up in this series, and that's a nice thing because it is about, airplane fighter pilots, and it is a little bit of a detour to the main story that has been, instigating throughout this entire series. But I started to learn something as I was watching this episode, and something that kind of bothered me. As much as I like the Tuskegee Airmen in this series, which are mostly portrayed by Brandon Cook, Gatwa, and Josiah Cross, I don't think this is the right way to do it. One, they're being introduced in the penultimate, the second to last episode of the series. Two, they're not really given much to do outside of a couple missions that are not very long to begin with. I think this series, if they were to do what they would smartly should do, this would be a backdoor pilot to the Tuskegee Airmen storyline to going to do in their own limited series. And I think you could bring Brandon Cook and Gatwa and, of course, Josiah Cross into the mix. But telling the story the way it's been told, these characters feel like short shrift in a lot of respects. And they're given stuff to do in this episode, don't get me wrong. I think Rees handles it very, very well. We see some of the victory celebrations, stuff like that. But we don't get enough of them. We basically feel like counterparts, or not really counterparts, but kind of secondary characters to the main story that's going on. And there's too many. This episode is kind of all over the place. It's kind of a mess to begin with because there's so many storylines and threads that need to wrap up that are being played out. That adding the Tuskegee Airmen, which were a major part of the war, is fine, but there is no. This is a thing where they should be kind of integrated throughout the entire series, and they're not. And I feel that Rees was put into a place where she wanted to tell the story, but she was only given a certain amount of time to do it. And I just don't think it works, to be fairly honest. I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting how, the race situation back in the 40s and 50s and 60s plays out somewhat in this episode. But, because this is war and everybody's kind of equal in the kind of nature of taking down the opposition, the Germans and the Russians, stuff like that, you get to see when these three individuals of the Tuskegee Airmen are sent to the POW camp that, of course, Buck and Bucky are at. There is some kind of pushback a little bit, but they just kind of finally work together to try and escape from this POW camp. And I think that's fine and all, but I think there's so much there that you could tell about the Tuskegee Airmen that is not really kind of put in there because it's only 51 minutes, and I'm sure they'll be in the last episode as well. But I think if you're going to call your show Masters of the Air and you're going to focus on one particular storyline and kind of throw into this really important storyline into the very end of the series, I just don't think it works. I really don't. I think it's a problematic thing where that's what the series has problems with, where it can't hold all the storylines together. And when it focuses on one particular storyline, it has to go and do the other storyline because it needs to have those characters in the episode. And you see that through that entire thing. And it's unfortunate nature for the Tuskegee Airmen themselves because they really their story should be told. I mean, it's a story that's very, very important and very interesting. And does a lot to how difficult this war was for all sides of, color and race and stuff like that, and how these individuals were put in their own place instead of being incorporated to the entire whole. And I think that's what the series needed to have its own series. It could be two series running concurrent and working together and kind of having its own cinematic universe a little bit. But here it's just like they're thrown into the mix at the very last second. It feels very unjustified. I think that's what most people have had problems who watch this entire series in one stead, is that there's just too much going on and there's just not enough character development. And like I said, the three African-American characters, the three individuals, they do what they can with it, but there's just not enough there to allow them to breathe. So therefore, their story is constantly moving really quickly, and there's just not enough to do. But I like how Austin Butler and Brandon Cook, I think it's Brandon Cook if I remember right, have a nice little moment where they kind of are devising, he sees the artwork or the maps or whatever, and they kind of work together, listening to the radio and kind of planning out an escape. And there is a lot of good stuff there, so I do give it credit. It's one of those things where it's hard to hate on it a lot, but it's just, I feel like that the series needs more, it deserves more that it doesn't get. That's the main problem. But you can see it in Buck and Bucky's storyline. line where, they're just kind of thrown into the mix where they're at the POW camp, but there's only so much you could do in the 50 minutes or the hour, a couple hours that they've had so far, where it just feels like there's some cool stuff there, but you have to stretch it like so many different places, and it doesn't feel like it's justified. And the only real reason they even go back to the POW camp is because the Tuskegee Airmen are there. They're captured by the SS, and during the one of the invasions of France, and it's just, I don't know. It really feels like it feels like it needs its own series. The POW camp needs its own series, and I don't know. It maybe like not having Buck or Bucky come back after crash landing. Maybe just focus on something else. It's really difficult storytelling. I understand. I'm not like blaming the storytellers for doing what they need to do, but you can tell they're in a pinch. You can tell they're finally getting to a point where they have to wrap up everything, and they're missing so much stuff and so much good stuff. And, this episode doesn't even really focus on air battles and stuff like that, which, once again, you can develop a character development. Look, I know you guys don't like me when I say this, but Band of Brothers, it really integrates very, very well. And even the Pacific, for the most part, integrates very, very well. These kind of push into the action, but also have the characters kind of react to the action. And here is the main problem, where you now focus on all this character and all this side stuff, and then like the action gets left behind in kind of a side story step, and you're not kind of balancing the whole. And I don't know. I felt the Buck and Bucky stuff was fine for the most part. It is injected with a little bit of intrigue and interesting nature when it comes to when the Tuskegee Airmen come in and they kind of devise, and they hear about D-Day. They hear about the Russians invading Germany. They hear about, they see the SS taking over these camps, which makes it more difficult for them to do what they need to do. And therefore, it's very kind of lopsided in a lot of respects. And what becomes like the third thread of this episode is, of course, Crosby, who is, he's planning D-Day. Be absolutely honest, that's what his main thing is in this episode. The other part of it is he's burning out. He's worked so hard and so long. He's been up for so many hours and so many days. He's starting to see things, which I've experienced that before myself, but he's starting to hear things. And so therefore, he just can't handle all of this, all this stress. And it finally gets to him to the point where he's like 3 days out from D-Day, or whatever it is, a couple of days out from D-Day, the invasion of Normandy and Omaha Beach and stuff like that. And after his doctors have given warnings about taking pills to make sure he's able to be healthy, he passes out. He sleeps for 3 days. He wakes up and he's told about D-Day invasion, how the people, the planes have come out of the clouds, and they see like all the ships on the water as it's invading the Normandy beach, and that's really cool stuff. But it's just, once again, you don't see hardly any of that. It's more told in flashback, because I guess the Normandy invasion has been told so many times that they don't really need to stress it. But you don't see a lot of what you should be seeing, where once again, this goes back to how uneven this episode is and how uneven this series has been, where like you should see some of the bombings of the bridges. You should see some of this stuff. You should see some of the Normandy invasion from the air, like as little as there is. All it is told in expressionism and dialogue, and it's not very interesting, to be fairly honest. And it's the major problem with what this episode is trying to do, where it's trying to have its cake and eat it too, and it's just not doing it very successfully. And so when he's told by his superior that he has to take a month off, it's just like, well, I mean, okay, cool. I mean, you spent like 10 minutes with him at all in general. And once again, it's the nature of this episode having to speed through everything. So you could spend like a whole episode just with Crosby and the nature of what he's having to go through. But of course, Sandra, the Belle Powley character, is off on her own little mission, which is another thread that's being run through. And how she really doesn't really she stresses the point, but she's like, I can't really be with you. I have to do what I have to do. And he has a wife in New York anyways. And, he doesn't want to go to New York, but he has no choice. And it's just, once again, it's a thread that's being run really quickly, and it's trying to lead to the end. And just watching all these people and missions and stuff that's being thrown under the wayside to speed to an ending where it could have been like 13 episodes instead of 9, it really doesn't focus on what it needs to focus on, and it's really kind of sad to see. But once again, I don't blame Rees for the situation of what she's handed, because even though she's a part screenwriter of this episode, she's only allowed to be given so much to do, and Apple TV's like, you need to finish this up in 9 episodes. So therefore, she's involved with like the last 2 or 3 episodes of the series, and therefore she's able to bring in characters, but it's just not enough at this point. It really is. And this is the main problem with the series, and why it is definitely the third out of 3 of this kind of companion stuff is just, there's just not enough there, to be fairly honest. And it is really problematic, but I think in the end, it's still like a 7.5 out of 10. It's still an interesting episode. It has some interesting stuff. You know, when the SS kind of invade, come into the bunker, and they have to hide everything. I think the 3 African-American individuals, Brandon Cook, Ncuti, Gatwa, and Josiah Cross, do a competent job to at least introduce the Tuskegee Airmen, which are very integral parts of the war. I think the story is heading to an interesting conclusion, but in the end, it's not enough to justify why this series is kind of lingered the way it does and why it's kind of portraying the way it does. And, you know, as much as it looks pretty and gorgeous, you still need the story. And I've read comments about, you know, different individual characters that are not given that, and it's unfortunate. So overall, this is probably the weaker of the series, a 7.5 out of 10. Just too much stuff going on, not enough time to explore everything. And yeah, it's going to be kind of a disappointment for the series. So anyways, with that said, that is going to be my take on part 8 of course, Masters of the Air. Yeah, so that'll do it. Thank you so much for watching. In the comments below, what do you think of this episode? If you liked it, tell me why you liked it. You know, information, all as always, you know, is definitely worth a read and stuff like that. So let me know. But otherwise, if you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out, guys.